All right. Thanks for tuning in to All Things Division Three Soccer with Simple Coach and Jackie. That there is my Chief Executive Officer, Jackie, and I'm Simple Coach. So today I wanted to dive into something that everyone has an opinion about, and I'm sure if you're watching, you're going through this to one extent or another, or have been through it. But I wanted to talk about recruiting and wanting to play in Division Three soccer. Now, keep in mind, I'm not a head coach anywhere, so what I'm telling you is born on a couple things. First, it's just from my experience as a parent, where I'd gone through the recruiting process with one son, and I'll say unsuccessfully, and I'm currently undergoing with another son. So I've seen a lot and experienced a lot from that perspective. The next one is as a coach and sort of what I know I would be looking for if I were recruiting and sort of the information that I would want to know and whatnot. And then the third perspective that I would say is my conversations with coaches that I've had. If you just watch my videos that I'll post, I think up here somewhere, or I'll put some link where I talk to different coaches. So I talk to Coach Ruben Burke at Connecticut College. I talked to Coach Jamie Gunderson at Christopher Newport University, and I've spoken with Coach Craig Appleby at Johns Hopkins University. All of them have, at the end of those interviews, they talk about, and I specifically bring it up for that reason, is to talk about recruiting and how does a player get in touch with you and those sorts of questions. So consider this show today a pulling that all together. Now, just keep in mind, like I said, every coach is going to be different, and I'll talk about that. But I think there's some basic guidelines to the way I would be approaching it. And quite frankly, successfully or unsuccessfully, the way I've approached it with my kids. And I'll explain why and sort of why I think that and again, borne out through years of experience and conversations with coaches and whatnot, and clubs and whatnot. So, all right. So with that, I hope you enjoy this. I really do hope it, if anything, it just sort of helps you that first step, which is what I always sort of had, encountered difficulty with, which is what's that first thing that you need to do, or what's, how do I get the coach's attention? Especially when a coach is going to be, isn't just looking at you or if you're a parent, your son or daughter, they're looking at 100 kids, and they're going to whittle it down. So, and how do you get into that to start? How do you get into that 100? So, all right. And here we go. Let's kick this off. Okay. So on a bright note, this is free. Well, maybe I should charge you a subscription or a like or whatever. There are services out there that will help you in the recruiting process. And quite frankly, I don't know if they're good or bad, worthwhile or not. Maybe at some point I could have a conversation with someone there at one of these organizations, these businesses that are out there. And, if that's an avenue you want to pursue, that great on you. It's not something that we had done. And again, I just don't know enough about them and what they actually are capable of doing. So, all right. So just to give you a sense of the flow, I'm just going to talk about some numbers and to give some perspective, because I think parents and players in high school lose that perspective and what the obstacles really are into making a roster at the Division III level. Fortunately, Division III is the largest division within the NCAA and the NAIA. Something like 40% of all student athletes are represented in Division III. So there is a lot of opportunity across the number of schools. And then it's just an issue of marrying you as a player or your player to the school that they would want to go to, which is the tricky part, right? It's an art, not necessarily a science. I'm going to touch upon what I think is probably the most important thing about college in general, but in particular Division III. I'm going to talk about what I think are sort of building a relationship or building relationships. I'll show you some videos, a couple videos as examples of what can be done. And then I'll talk about playing and the importance of playing and going back to the game. And then I'll just sort of wrap it up at the end. And hopefully, like I mentioned, this becomes helpful. So with that, let's do this. So if you didn't know, Division III is made up of 443 colleges and universities that are classified as Division III, and it's basically an application process and size of school and sort of different qualifications that they're Division III. Within the 443 schools, within those 443 schools, there are 414 men's soccer programs. So across the country, there are. If you're a high school ball player trying to get on a men's team, there are 414 options. Right, obviously ranging in quality and all that stuff, and we could talk about that if it pops into my head a little bit later. Women's side, it's a little bit better. There's 431 women's programs across the country. And if you just did math, again, I'm sort of simple math. I'm not a super math guy, but if you just did math, there's 13,248 men soccer players playing Division III soccer, and there's 13,792 women's soccer players across the country. Do the math again. It's 32 players per roster. So if I decided that I wanted to go to Anna Maria University there and I want to play on the women's team, there are 32 spots on that team. Now, keep in mind, they're not recruiting 32 players a year. They're recruiting a subset of that, and we'll talk about that. But keep that in mind. Numbers provide a dose of reality that you need to keep in mind. So, I found this pretty cool map. If you're, again, Division III, this is what the Division III landscape is in the United States. You could see and it bears out, especially if you travel quite a bit. It's heavily, Division III is really heavily, there are a lot of schools in the Midwest and the Northeast, and a little less so in the South, and then Colorado College sits out there on its own, and then you have a number of West Coast schools. So depending on where you're want to play, just keep that in mind. If you want to go to South Dakota and play Division III soccer, there are no schools in South Dakota that are Division III. Right? Just be mindful of that. So, I think I found this on the NCAA website. Maybe I'll try to find the link and post it down there in case you're interested. Okay, so why Division III? Why go to Division III and why play soccer at Division III? Well, I I didn't write anything here because I just thought the pictures spoke enough. You're going to Division 3 for academics. Don't forget that, right? Your objective is after 4 years is to have a pretty kickin' degree from probably a school that um, you know, focuses on educating a well-rounded individual. So, especially in the liberal arts, you will, if they're liberal arts schools, you're gonna study all sorts of different subjects just so that you have a grasp of the world around you. And I think, again, in my experience with players, sometimes they forget this. Sometimes they think this is the beginning of a professional career. And I hate to be the the guy who hands out lemons, but you're going there for an education and for 4 years, maybe 5. But that's what you want. That's why you're going to Division 3, is that academics. Again, if you fit the bill, right? There's plenty of great Division 1 academic institutions, but right, that playing ball at Division 1 level is a whole different animal, whole different set of recruiting issues, and the talent level that you're competing against is the elite of the elite. And so if you're watching this video wondering about Division 3, well, but you're going Division 1, it's not going to apply. It's not going to apply. So, anyhow, all right. So that's why Division 3, right? I thought the pictures spoke volumes. Get it? Volumes, library, the library pick. Oh, terrible pun. Need more coffee. Okay. So let's talk about connecting with a coach. Invariably, each coach that I've spoken with says the starting point. There's 2 starting points. One is to send out an email to the coach. The second is to fill out the recruiting questionnaire. Both of those will accomplish the same sort of thing, but they're looking for both. The recruiting questionnaire goes also to the admissions department, which is also important because they're going to basically weigh in on whether or not you're going to be able to get accepted, and we'll talk about that. But the email your introductory email, you should include 3 things. Right? I'll go in reverse order. First, you're going to want to include a schedule of any games you got coming up, especially if your schools that you're looking at are within a 2-hour, 3-hour radius of where you live. There's a chance that the coach or assistant coach will come, or an assistant coach will come and watch you at one of your games, one of your regular season games. And what I mean by schedule, I also mean high school. If you're fortunate enough to play high school, yes, I said fortunate, and not on one of these MLS Next teams that don't allow you to play high school, include your high school schedule. I'll say videos, which I'll show just after this. But then most importantly, your grades and your test scores. Now, I had a great conversation with Coach Appleby at Johns Hopkins University, and his first deciding threshold, whether or not he is even going to not delete you out of his inbox, are your grades and scores. Why? Because he works at Johns Hopkins University. He's recruiting for Johns Hopkins University, and if you don't have a 1,500 or in your SATs, or even within that ballpark, like, he can't even give you a look. It's not even worth his time, because he knows, like, if you have a 1,200 SAT or a 1,300 SAT, you might be way too low on the scale for Johns Hopkins to consider. And they're an elite education. I think he mentioned Caltech, MIT, and Johns Hopkins, right? Those 3 schools have ridiculously high standards. So cut the coach a break. Cut cut Coach Appleby a break and send him your grades and scores so that he knows right off the bat whether or not you qualify. And you should have done your due diligence to know that whether or not you could play at a place like Johns Hopkins or MIT. Right? There's probably wiggle room, but right, that's the conversation between you and the coach. Maybe you don't have a 1500 or a 1550 SAT. Maybe you have a 1450. Is that enough? That's, like I said, that's a conversation with the coach. Before I go forward, the recruiting questionnaire. The recruiting questionnaire is going to be sort of summarize a lot of this information that you're going to be able to provide. And like I said, it also goes to the admissions department so that they're going to realize that, hey, here's a kid who is interested, and they sort of will keep tabs on you, so to speak, and start to, I'll just say, recruit you from that perspective. So keep that in mind. All right. So, and then the video. I'm just going to show you two videos. One is professionally made, cost about $500-ish. It's pretty much it's a 5-minute intro video. It gives some quick information, and then it just goes into highlights. And I'll run it for a little bit, and then I'm going to show you one that is not a professional one. It is collecting these highlights, putting them together, and that's your introductory video. I would suspect, depending on the position, 1, 2, depending on your quality, and 3, depending on the school you are choosing to go to. Is it super competitive? If you're thinking of going to Connecticut College, a national champion, you don't want to leave. You want to try to present your best foot forward. So maybe at that level, you're going to want to do a professionally made highlight film. Something to consider. So, all right, let's do this. Okay, to give you some context, this one is about 4 minutes. 4 minutes long. Like I said, this is the professionally created one, and I'm not going to run it for the whole 4 minutes, but because I'm sure you've seen. I got to believe you've either seen or made or actually, made one yourself if you're that talented. I certainly am not. So, okay. Okay. So just a couple things on the video, right? To me, and this is now me as a coach and sort of what I would look to. You want to show them what you're capable of as a player. So your highlights. If you're a goal scorer, you want to show your goals, right? Like if you're a midfielder, you want to show different abilities, whether it's goal scoring or passing or vision on the field, that sort of thing. You're trying to convey what kind of a player you are. And yeah, and like I said, 4 minutes or so. These are different clips, different games, different sort of things, passes, goals, misses, right? A few show not so much that this player scored, but that he saw something, right, and aimed to execute on something that maybe other players won't necessarily see, or how he reacts to the game. So okay, so now I'm going to move to this next one, which again is just assembled and pieced together, pretty straightforward. Okay, I'll say this is a goalkeeper video, which makes it a little bit more difficult to capture things about a goalkeeper, but you sort of want the same gist: what you're capable of doing in goal, your saves, or how you distribute. Are you good with your feet? That sort of thing. So let's roll with this. Fortunately, there's no fancy music or background, although I presume you could do that. But so this goalkeeper is really good from a distribution standpoint. So you see a lot of distribution, and obviously on that one, a really good shot stopper. All right, playing a little tiki taka here. Okay, that'll do. Okay, so those are the two, right? Like one is professional, the other is like I said, pieced together on your own. So that's what you're going to want to include in that initial email. Okay, so now that you saw the videos, I'm sure I'm beating a dead horse here with what you want to do in the initial email. Definitely do the questionnaire, like I said, and then ultimately what you're trying to do with the coach in the school is you want to build a relationship, right? Like that applies anytime you sort of want to, you later in life you're going to be selling, you're going to build relationships, and in your work life, what have you. You want to build a relationship with that coach so that they're comfortable talking to you. And this is corny, but it humanizes you, right? Like when you send your when when you send your email, you're just a video at that point, right? And if it's enough to warrant you to get on there, okay, we're going to take a look at this ball player. Now you want them to look at you as a soccer player and as a human being, so that it's a lot easier for them to interact with. It's a lot easier to interact with somebody you think is a human being than if you don't, right? Which is why we have all this nonsense on anti-social media. So anyhow, so yeah, so that to me is the biggest, it ends up being the biggest thing, is, and whatever you're comfortable, how do you build a relationship with the coach that at the school that you're interested in going to? Okay. Oh, let's go back. Okay, so that was about connecting, right? You've connected to the coach, you're on the list, what have you. So the second part of this is to play, right? And let them know you're playing and where you're playing, right? Your regular season, your club, your high school, what have you, wherever you're playing. Again, if you're looking regionally, if you're in Pennsylvania and you're looking to go to a Pennsylvania or a New Jersey or a New York school, send that information out because coaches will travel, right? Budgets at Division 3 school soccer programs isn't a lot, right? So it's easier for them to get in a car to drive 2 hours to watch a prospect than it is to, and I'll touch upon the tournaments, to travel to Florida or to California, and stay for 3 days to watch prospects. So just keep that in mind, right? Like you definitely want to keep them in the loop as to when you're playing. And they might not tell you that they're showing up. They might show up, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. The second part to playing is going to their ID camps. And I actually think the ID camps are much more important than anything else you'll do. For 2 reasons. One, it shows that you're committed to going to the school, because no one wants to do an ID camp and pay, 50, 100, 150, $200 for a half day ID camp if they're not interested in going to that school. So for the coach, it ends up being an indication of interest if you go to their camp, that hey, they're probably serious. And the best thing about the ID camp is you're going to be seen by the coach in a much more reduced atmosphere. They're not looking at 1,000 kids, they're looking at 30. In a context of a training session or training sessions that they will run. So you will be put in that collegiate atmosphere, and they can see how you react to it. And then the fourth thing, you could actually speak to them, and they can see if you're coachable, or you're a hothead, or they'll be able to pin that out. As I always say, right, I don't necessarily judge how good or how bad a player is, but you could sort of determine a personality of a player within the first 5 minutes, right? And coaches look at that. First 5 minutes, they're going to make a judgment call. It's like, when you're first introduced to somebody, you only have one chance for that introduction. So come out in a positive way, and they're going to make that snap judgment within the first 5 minutes. So and I'll touch upon that in a little bit. And then finally, let's talk tournaments. So my thinking on this has sort of changed quite a bit, and over time. Whereas I used to go to all the tournaments wherever the coaches are. And I've come to the conclusion that traveling great distances for tournaments, unless you're interested in going to that state where there are schools that have that are in that state, I think are a waste of time. And there I said it. I probably upset the camp tournament industrial complex out there by saying so. But if you have to hop on a plane, if you're in Massachusetts, which is a state with a bunch of schools, and nearby, 100 Division 3 schools. If you're in Massachusetts and you're flying to California for a tournament, a showcase tournament, you're either financially in a great spot, or you're not too bright. There, I said it. Let's look at the reality of a tournament, right? You're going to play 3 games over 3 days. There's going to be 100, 200 teams. These coaches are going to show up, and probably 200 kids are going to email them how they're going to be at that tournament. Some may interest, some may not. But these coaches are going to try to play any number of these of those 100, 200 kids. So if you're lucky, that coach will stay around for maybe one of your games. Usually it's a half. if not less, right? If they sit down for 15 minutes, they watch you, they take their notes, and then they move on. That's a reality as well. And I will say, before I keep rambling on about this, at tournaments, where do coaches go? They figure out what the best games are, what the best talent is. For whatever reasons, it's level, or who they play, who they compete. They got a reputation. They're nationally ranked. All those things come into it. So you might not even see a coach. True story. Tournament I was at with one of my sons. Sent out all these emails. All these coaches were going to be there. I knew half of them. They were, they're good coaches, I guess. Right next to the field, there was an MLS Next game going on. And at the same time, his field was empty. There were no coaches watching. Next over on the MLS Next team, I probably counted 35 coaches, including the schools that he was interested in going, watching the MLS Next game. Now, some of those schools have no shot getting some of these kids, but that's what they were watching. They were watching the best game with the best players, pining that they're going to be able to get somebody. So tournaments, unless it's local, unless it's nearby, in my book, certainly not worth the effort or the expense. I would suggest you take that money and you go to, again, ID camps. Go to the coaches' ID camps, and you do one of two things. Like I said, you indication of interest, but also keep in mind, Division III, lots of coaches have to augment their salaries, and I mean, let's talk economics. And by going to the camp, you're helping the coach out. So that's the reality of it. Okay, so I probably said a lot more than I thought I was, because I can ramble on about this for quite some time. But just to give you a heads up, and some things to consider, just really some things to consider. First of all is obviously COVID. My son my son had a really rough time in the recruiting space because of COVID. Shut down tournaments and games, and every time he thought he'd get a look, they wouldn't. And then when they finally did, they gave him 30 minutes, and it just never sort of happened. I would say things are clearing up, but it's just something to keep in the back of your mind. I'd also go as far as to say, like, look, you have your opinions about vaccinations and whatnot. Each school sort of operates independently and might have different requirements for the vaccine or for COVID and COVID relief and sort of all those sort of things and how they manage it. I mean, that might be something that you want to consider at these schools. The first thing a coach does is going to, put you on, I refuse to put you in the search bar. I won't mention the name of the company, but on Brave or Bing or some search engine and type in your name and try to see what comes up. And I would suggest that if you're using anti-social media, you make sure that it represents you in a positive way, not in a negative, because they're looking at 100 kids, and for a while they're looking at why not to recruit you. Right? They're looking at, do I really want a kid who has a anti-social media footprint that is is not good. I don't want to deal with that. And so that's the reason. You could be a great ball player, but if that's what they think you are, you're done. And they'll move on to the next guy. Right? They have options, right? They have plenty of numbers to well-established programs, right, that have a recruiting pipeline, and they have options. They have 20 midfielders that are asking them to play, and they have 15 forwards. And if they look at somebody and it just doesn't, you don't represent yourself well and professional online, they're not going to bother with you. The last thing I would say is be aware that coaches vary in style, in how they like to play, in their capabilities. Some are good, some are not so good, some have a different opinion about how they like the game to be played versus another. Some are consummate realists about, we're just, what do we have to do to win, versus others who are, hey, if we're gonna play, let's play well. All of these variables, you just keep in mind when you're going through this process. You're not the only one who's on the selling block, right? You're there. That coach and that school is on this selling block. So you have to buy what they're selling, and be careful, because there are coaches, and I'm not saying anything out of turn. And I'm sure there's coaches who are agreeing. There are coaches who will basically, if they're interested in you, will tell you what you want to hear. Right? Will tell you what you want to hear in order for you to go to that school. And I used to think it was only a Division I thing, but it's not. It's every division. I've said over the last 15, 20 years, Division III has gotten pretty darn serious, and it's gotten very competitive. And from a recruiting perspective, it makes or breaks years, right? It makes or breaks your year. If you have a really good recruiting class, you could set yourself up nicely for the next few years. If you have a really poor recruiting class, you could be impacted who knows for how long. So they're looking to bring in the best guys. And so, like I said, they'll tell you what you want to hear. Oh yeah, we could see you making an impact, and I see you as your favorite position. I could see you getting minutes, and tell you all these things, and they don't know. They're not going to know until they get to camp and they start seeing you, and then ultimately they're going to pick the best 11. So, with that, let me this, you take it for what it's worth. This is I'm a big, I'm a ball player through and through. I've always considered myself, even now, I still think, Greg Berhalter's going to give me a call to play in goal for the national team. I just do. But, what you're considering doing, going to a Division III school, couple things. Hit the books. Right? Keep studying. It doesn't matter the ups and downs of the recruiting process, whether you're going to play or not. Keep studying. Keep doing the best you can, because you don't want to take breaks, because if your grades falter, and especially at the elite level, if you're going to, let's say, Johns Hopkins or MIT or Caltech, and you're going to one of those schools where you're where it's your grades are really important, and you slack off, they'll unfriend you. they'll unadmit you. So you got to keep doing that, and that's the most important thing. As I mentioned, the academics. Again, that's my view of Division III. I'd also add to that end, make sure you choose the school, not the soccer. And what do I mean by that? You want to go to your best school that you would like to go to study for 4 years, live for 4 years, that has such a transformational impact on you. The soccer is great, and I think playing collegiate athletics and being a student athlete is a real blessing, and it's super valuable. But the soccer field's only going to do so much for you. It's what the degree you get at the end. So make sure that whatever school you're choosing, it's because academically that's where you want to be, and where you could go to study what you want to study. I know that's not rocket science. Now, the other thing I mentioned is it's game on. When you start the recruiting process, you have to look at every practice and every game and any time you step on the field as an opportunity to either show yourself and show how good you are, or to get better. Because the last thing a coach wants is a player that sort of coasts through what they consider a pretty important development years as they're looking to bring on a player. So if you're playing in a game, whether or not you realize a coach is there could be a coach there. You go out there as competitive and as serious as you can be. That's just a personal word of advice as a coach. I've seen coaches unimpressed with ball players because they thought they were goofing around at a particular game, and that player didn't even know the coach would be there. So if you are serious about Division III soccer, prepare yourself physically. Most high school ball players, except for in the context of playing high school soccer, have never competed 6 days a week for 4 months in a row. And so the physical demands that will be placed upon you as a Division III soccer player are great. So you better be physically prepared to go in. I would add, as I mentioned about playing to the best and competing to your best, you have to compete. At all turns, you are competing. I always say this to my guys, right? You go to an ID camp, can be some great friendships that you forge. I'm not saying that that's not the case, but you step over the white line and that whistle blows, the guy next to you is not your friend anymore. He's competing for that same spot you are. Right? Whether it's a simple little rondo that you're participating in, or you're playing 11v11. Those guys want your spot and you want their spot. And so you have to compete. All right? And just because you think you are a big fish in a big pond at your high school, at your club, or what have you, you get to college and you're not even you're not even a fish yet. Right? You're new. I don't want to say you're nothing, but from a soccer perspective, you've shown nothing. You've demonstrated nothing. You start from zero. So the quickest way to get you in the best spot is to compete. Okay. And so remember this when I talked earlier about the numbers of, the 13,000 ball players on the men's side and the 13,500 at the women's side, and there's 430 some odd schools and with women's programs. Remember the number 8, because 8, generally speaking, could be as high as 10. That is the number of players, of recruits, that at the end of it all, that a college coach is going to bring in to their freshman class. 8, maybe 10, depending on who's graduating and all these different set of circumstances. Right? 8. So you have to figure out a way to be one of those 8. And so you can't think that you are not competing at any given moment. Because a number 8 fills up really quick. really, really quick, especially when they're looking at 100 kids, 200 kids. Who knows? I don't even, I've heard some crazy stuff. I am sure Coach Burke at Connecticut and Coach Gunderson at Christopher Newport have multiples of hundreds that they sift through. So keep that in mind. The number 8. And how can you be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8 on that roster at that school that you want to go to? And then finally, I would just add, listen, regardless, you will take pride in the fact that you are always a ball player. You never forget the time that you put into the game. And the ups, the downs, the positives, whether you get to play or not, it's going to call you and it's going to have a place for you no matter how you compete. And I hope that just because you don't make it, you figure out a way. If you don't make it, you find a way to continue to play, or coach or ref, do whatever, what have you. And, you stay rooted in the game, because speaking personally, it's given me, look at this, right? Like, it's given me an opportunity to do things that I never thought, or I never would have had the opportunity to do if I didn't play. Okay. All right, so that's that. That's sort of my insights. And like I said, I am no genius at this. This is just experience, and I tried to cut it down to as simple as I could. You can get really deep in this sort of thing, but I wish you luck, whether you're a parent or or you're the ball player. I wish you luck. I wish you the best. I hope that someday we can cross paths on the soccer field, and or you see me at the next national team game, plying my trade in between the pipes. So best of luck, and get at it. Get at it. All right. Thanks for joining. Say bye, Jackie. No. All right. Guess not. So yeah.